On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we get to the biggest takeaways from KU's loss to Texas Tech, including some of the positives and negatives from the game for KU, but also what are the proper expectations for this program at this point in time?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day, and thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. And on today's edition, we're talking more takeaways from KU's loss to Texas Tech, as we're going to get into what should be the proper expectations for this program as well, because I've seen a lot of conversation about that, as well as some of the positives and negatives to take away long-term from the game. We'll get to our GOATs of the game, who performed well, who struggled, and then we'll have an early look ahead to the bye week and Kansas State. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. So Kansas loses to Texas Tech 42-17. And honestly, like the biggest debate and argument, I mean, a lot of conversation about the game, but the biggest debate and argument I was seeing among fans was, what are the proper expectations for where this Kansas football program is? Because it is such a vast difference of opinion when you look at, where this Kansas program was in the 2010s. The fact that if you're even winning 5, 6, 7 games a season right now, that becomes incredibly impressive and becomes incredibly, much more valuable or much more enjoyable than it was, just 5, 6 years ago even. The flip side to it is, okay, you're now entering, year 5 as with this coaching staff, I guess, is, where you are with the program. You've seen a 9-win season under your belt. You've seen 2 bowl seasons under your belt. Should you start to raise the expectations? Should the bar start to be raised higher? I do think it's interesting when you go back to, when they were making a hire, every time that Kansas has made a coaching hire, from the 2010s or whatever, and there would always be certain people who would say they should hire a triple option coach because that'll help them get to, at least 5-7, 6-6, 7-5. And I always had a friend who would point out and be like, trust me, if that happens, you're saying it from a point right now where they're winning 2-3 games every year. If you get to a point where you're winning 5, 6, 7 games every year, all of a sudden then your adjustment, your expectations are going to adjust, and you're going to start being like, but what if we win 9? It is human nature. We always just want more, Was it Andrew Carnegie, or I don't know, one of the old billionaires, moguls or whatever, back in the early Industrial Revolution, and they were asked how much is enough money, and the answer was more. It's always want more, and that's where you get to as a fan. The bar is always moving as things go on, and so I think this is difficult because you do have the fan base that's like, why shouldn't I hope for the best? Look what Indiana's doing. Indiana is not a tradition-rich football program, and they're one of the best teams in the country this year, and they went to the college football playoff last year. I don't know, you look at the success. I know Oklahoma State stunk this year and last year, but you look at the success that Mike Gundy, for instance, or a lot of the past coaches, Les Miles, Jimmy Johnson, had at Oklahoma State. Geographically, there is not really much of an inherent advantage for Oklahoma State to what it is for Kansas. I guess you could say it's closer to Texas, and maybe the state of Oklahoma recruiting is a little bit better than the state of Kansas. I don't know, but you get what I'm saying. If you're just talking the campus and stuff like that, it's not really one advantage over the other. So, why shouldn't you have high expectations, and why shouldn't you want the best for your team? That's all totally fair and well. At the same point in time, I guess this is where I'm at with it, is that I think you should hope, you should aspire to be that. There's no reason not to set the goals, aim for the moon, land in the clouds. There's no reason you shouldn't set your goals and hope and want for that to be the case. If you own a local business, sure, shoot for the moon. Try to make $100 million this year. But there's a difference between your hope and your dream and what you should push for, because shooting for those aspirations is what is going to allow you to even have a chance of getting there, and is going to better your chance of falling short, still having success. But there's a difference between that and like having a understanding of, okay, but what is realistic here, I guess. Like, again, it's only 2 bowl seasons in 4 years in what we're talking about being removed from a decade of despair for KU football. This isn't a situation like Dave Doran at NC State where they're winning 7, 8, 9 games for a decade. You know, this isn't fully established yet. It's not. I know we want it to be. It's year 5. They've had some good success in games and stuff, but it's not. And at the end of the day, we talked in the preseason. And heck, I talked to a lot of people. Like, I talk to people all the time, like, oh, what do you think before the season, right? And most people, let's win 6 games. Let's go back to a bowl game. That's what I want to see. Let's win 7 games, Oh, the Vegas over under 7.5. That'd be cool if they went over. They win 8 games. And then at some point along the way in the season, and I get it, again, hope for the best, shoot for the moon. But you have to have the understanding that even though you are shooting for the moon, you have to have the realistic expectation of saying, hey, realistically, what did I say all along? Win 6 or 7 games, beat Kansas State, win a bowl game, like whatever. Those are your goals. Kansas right now is sitting at 4-3. They just lost to Texas Tech 42-17. It was a big loss. Probably could have been closer than that based on the second quarter momentum, but also probably could have been further than that if not for the right second quarter. Look back to some of the years with Mark Mangino where they're making a bowl game. Not the Orange Bowl year, but some of the other years where they're making a bowl game. And it's like when you went up against Texas or in Oklahoma, you got smashed. And again, that doesn't mean you should just accept that. You should be working actively so that, next year, you're the team in Texas Tech's position, right? That you get the donations from, I don't know, but maybe that stuff's just not possible. The point being, you should both be hopeful for the best possible outcome while also not making rash decisions if it doesn't hit the best possible outcome. It's like playing the lottery and being like, I'm going to win the lottery. I'm hoping to win this thing. I'm going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. And then if you lose, instead of having an understanding of being like, okay, I really wanted to win that, but I understand why I didn't, like the odds are against me. Instead of doing that, it's being like, okay, well, now I'm going to sell my house. Now I'm going to sell my car. Now I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to get a different, and like upheaving everything. So I guess point being this, Kansas right now through 7 games of the season is playing very much like a team who's a 6 or 7 win team. They're better than bad teams. They're on par with other teams or it's going to be close. And then they're going to be worse than the teams who were like your top 10, 15, 20 teams in the country. That kind of defines a 6 or 7 win team to me. And so I guess I'm not overly freaking out about the Tech game. Yes, there were certain things. We'll get to our takeaways from the game that, you don't like to see and some things you like to see. But I guess from a big picture perspective, again, I'd love for Kansas to play for a Big 12 title. I'd love for them to have that be their goal. That should be their goal, right? Aim for the moon. But it's okay if you land in the clouds too. It's okay. And again, if we're talking, if we fast forward to 2035 and every year Kansas winning 5, 6, 7 games, sure, we can transform that conversation then. But I just feel like we've rushed this a little too much. And I'm not going to hold it against you if you want the best for this university, because you should have high aspirations. But I am going to hold it against you if you're like 6 or 7 wins just isn't enough right now. It's okay to want 10 or 12. It's also okay to be okay when, I don't know, those things don't always happen, I guess is kind of what I'm saying. Like, there is a good middle ground here where it's like, hey, it's not the A output that you want. And if this happens every single time, sure, I'm going to be a little bummed by it. But like, you have to have a realistic expectation and sit back on what we were expecting in the preseason to kind of be like, okay, this is kind of par for the course right now. So I don't know. Maybe that's going to go on deaf ears. We'll see. But takeaways from the game. We went a little long on that first one. Let's get to our in-game takeaways. That next. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Mazda. This episode moving the game forward like Mazda. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There's moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, the Lath Marjan 55-yard field goal, literally moved it forward, moved it to halftime shortly afterwards. But that was really cool to see that a KU kicker had that in him, and he's been a weapon so far for KU. Obviously didn't end up, changing the outcome of this one, but having a kicker like that, having the confidence that you can go to that, who knows, that could be the difference. Like we've talked a lot about KU having, some struggles at times in one-score games, is having a guy like Leif Marjan. Is that going to be worth a win for KU in one of those possible low-score or one-score games over the final 5 for KU? And when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. Just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Okay, let's get to actual game takeaways. Obviously, the offensive line was the biggest issue for KU. You look at Pro Football Focus, and they had a 10.1 pass blocking grade. They had a 55 run blocking grade. The run blocking grade is their second worst of the season. You can guess the worst. It's the Missouri game. And the pass blocking grade is, yes, it is their worst. I think I saw Michael Swain of Fog.net. I think he was saying it was the worst for KU since the Oklahoma game, I want to say, in 2020, where they had 9 sacks. This game also had 9 sacks. But yeah, so not great, obviously. It was obviously a big issue. I'll be honest, though, I don't have like an overwhelming concern for the rest of the season. I'm not saying I'm not at least a little concerned, because what you saw out there is certainly concerning, but this is kind of where I'm at. And this is kind of like honestly, it's everything with Kansas right now, except for like Jalon Daniels. Jalon Daniels has been the one thing which I guess you could, I don't know, but Jalon Daniels has been the one thing for KU that it's like, he's just been excellent all season long for Kansas. Everything else, you look at the offensive line play, you look at the secondary, although this game, oddly, against Tech, you didn't really get torched in the air, despite some early mistakes. The defense overall is the definition of what we were talking about earlier. When you're a 6 or 7 win team, you're going to beat the teams who are 3, 4, 5 win teams. You're going to lose to the teams who are 9, 10, 11 win teams. And then those teams are like 5 to 8 wins. It's going to be close, and it's going to kind of be coin flips. Like, that's kind of where it feels like Kansas is. And it feels like that's a lot of the units too. Like with the offensive line, think about it. In the games where you were playing teams who were overmatched, like Wagner, I don't know, I guess to a certain extent, like the West Virginia and the UCF games. UCF had a pretty good defensive line, but it felt like you handled them well, right? You had decent games. You had solid games. You look at the run totals. You look at the lack of like pressures and sacks and TFLs allowed. You had decent games. You look at, I guess, Fresno State, like, I don't know. You look at the games where they've played like really good competition. Both Texas Tech and Missouri are top 5 in the country in sack rate defensively, and you've really struggled, and you haven't been able to run the ball at all on those. Now, Utah is top 10 in sack rate, although Utah is, oddly enough, like you look at some of the EPA numbers against the run, they haven't been great there. Arizona has been their top 15 in sack rate. They're also like top 30 in some of the EPA against the run numbers. At least they were before the BYU game. I haven't checked after that. But outside of that, the other 3 teams you play down the road are like not top 50 or not top 45 teams in sack rate. So it is something where it's like, yes, it's a bit of a concern, but I don't know that Kansas is going to play another defensive line to the same level as Missouri or Texas Tech. And also, if we're talking about, again, going back to the expectation thing, I've kind of thought all the way through like 6 or 7 wins. And if that is the case, like, it's not like you're going to a New Year's 6 bowl game. It's not like you're going to the playoff. It's not like you're going to the Big 12 title game. Based on who is left on the schedule for KU, I think the offensive line is going to be fine. You know, could you get wrecked in one more game? Possibly. But I don't think it's going to be as big of a concern as it was in this game or Missouri, I guess, is where I'm at. I will say, I guess one long-term takeaway, I would like to see them start to cede a little bit of reps at left tackle. Calvin Clemens had a 0 pass block grade in this game. I didn't know that was possible. And it's interesting because you've consistently looked at the offensive line snaps game to game, like whether it's Amir Herring or Enrique Cruz. Both guys have been playing a majority of the snaps for KU at guard and tackle, but they're usually giving up 10, 15, 20 snaps per game to Nolan Gorsica is coming in for Cruz, and then Tavaki Tuiko-Lovato is coming in for Amir Herring. And I can't help but wonder, like, would you be better off doing that at left tackle? And maybe you just don't have as good of an answer there, but like, you look at Clemens this year, and again, I remain kind of steadfast that, like, I think Clemens could follow that Bryce Cabledew path where, you know, Cabledew was thrown into the fire early as a young player, slowly got better over the course of his career, and he was a 5-year player at KU. His 4th and 5th years at Kansas, he really took off. Clements is in year 3 at Kansas, and right now the PFF grade 39.6, the overall pass block grade this year 14.2. That's not getting it done. And I can't help but wonder, like, if a kid is struggling and he keeps going out there, would you be better off giving him a breather at points? I don't know. That would be my one long-term takeaway from this. Obviously, it wasn't a good game, but, I think there's reason to believe it could get better, especially when you look at Tech, arguably has the best defensive line in the country. The receiver core, for looking at a positive one, I do think they are coming along. We know what Emmanuel Henderson can do. We've seen some of the big games for him. Cam Pickett starting to get healthy again, and he's had back-to-back big weeks for KU with the UCF game and Texas Tech game. Feels like Keaton Kubeka is solidly getting into like a 2 to 3 catch a game role where you can count on him to make a few plays. Bowden Gruen has become this like big time passing target for KU. So I'm really starting to like when you combine what Jalon Daniels is doing with the receiving core coming along. I'm really liking that aspect for KU. I also wonder, like, did we see the KU passing defense get something figured out? Because you go back to the second half against UCF, and yes, you get a backup quarterback in there, but you go back to the second half against UCF, and then you carry it over into the Texas Tech game. And overall, the passing defense, look, I mean, Texas Tech's completing 50% of their passes. They had under 200 in passing yards in this game. Now, it was ugly early. Texas Tech, no matter what they were doing, guys were just like running wide open, but that was more in the running game, honestly, than the passing game. I know the second touchdown for Tech was a pass where the guy went untouched, but like outside of a few mistakes, like KU was actually good against the pass, like legitimately. And you could say, oh, well, they got a backup quarterback in this one too with Will Hammond, but like, look what Will Hammond did against Utah in the air. He did it both in the air and on the ground. Maybe that's the hope that Kansas figuring something out, at least in the passing game there. Now, on the flip side, I did mention the quarterback run a little bit there. I am a tad worried about stopping quarterback run because this isn't a situation of, oh, backup quarterback came in. He's never been in before. We didn't know what to expect. And all of a sudden he's running around. We didn't, tailor a game plan to that. And we weren't able to adjust fast enough. That's one story. It's another when we've seen Will Hammond. He came into this game very notable as the backup. The Tech fans were like clamoring, like, is he better than Baron Morton? You saw the Utah game. And they knew what they were getting into, and they weren't able to stop the QB run. And that scares me, especially going into the Kansas State game with Avery Johnson. Now, you look to the rest of the season, there's some other players that stick out there, too. You think of Devin Dampier at Utah, definitely a very good running quarterback. Noah Fafita is somebody who can run. So that's something that Kansas is going to have to get shored up after that wasn't great. And then the last piece here is probably one that I should at least touch on to mention. It's the idea of too conservative of play calling or being too conservative in game management, however you want to kind of term it. And yes, that would be accurate, defining Kansas specifically in the second half there. At the same point in time, I mentioned this earlier, I think it was after the Missouri game, one of our biggest takeaways, thank you everydayers if you already caught it, where we talked about, yes, it's a thing, but it's not one of my biggest takeaways from the game. We talked about it in the recap show, and it is a part of the game. But if we're having our biggest takeaways from the game, I don't know that it is one, because we've seen enough sample size here that I don't really expect it to change. And so it's not really an evaluation thing for me where it's like, okay, hey, this guy struggled doing this. Let's see if he can do this, or you could make this personnel change, do this instead of that. I think we've seen enough that, like, some of the questionable things that you have, like, that stuff's just there. That's just part of it, and from that perspective, it's not really a takeaway for me, even though it was a part of the game. And we did talk about it extensively in the recap show, which thank you if you caught that one. All right, let's get to our goats of the game. I don't think we're going to get an early look at Kansas State. Probably not going to have time, but that's okay. We have a bye week, extra week to do so. This is Locked on Jayhawks. And today's episode of LOJ is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can also get early futures on the college basketball season if you're wanting to bet KU. I mean, no time like ever for betting on Darren Peterson plus 850 to win the Wooden Award. You can get Kansas at mega plus odds to win the Big 12. You can get Kansas to win the national title at like 25 to 1 odds. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app and get started today. This episode's also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have that full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch's built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is just for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Plus, with Monarch Money, they have it all color coded, so it's really easy to see different stuff jumps off the page and makes it, I think, easier to understand, at least for me. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks. All right, let's get to our goats of the game, good and bad for KU. Let's start with the offense. Jalon Daniels gets a good goat. We talked about it, gave him one of our game balls in the post-game recap. Was really efficient overall, and even under duress, he still made things happen. He actually was KU's highest graded offensive player on Pro Football Focus. Daniel Highshaw was second at 68.1. I thought he looked pretty good, but obviously you didn't want to overrun him. And KU was also in a position in the game where they couldn't, establish the run a ton necessarily. Not that it would have been easy against Texas Tech, nor did they for the most part. But Highshaw had the most success running the ball for KU in this one. Cam Pickett and Bowden Gruen and Bryson Canty all had solid grades on Pro Football Focus in a game where the KU offensive line wasn't very good. Give credit to Bryce Foster. He had an 80.5 pass block grade. So at least there was I don't know. I think I made this mention a week ago. It's the opposite of the turd in the punch bowl. It's the punch bowl with the turd. And he was the punch bowl side of it. He was the good part of it for KU. But yeah, if we're looking at the bad goats from the KU offense, again, it would be the pass blocking. And let's just read through them. So Foster an 80.5 pass block grade. Kobe Baines had a 47.4. Nolan Gorska 41.8. Tavaki Tuigalavatu 27.8. Amir Herring 19.1. Leighton Cure 18.7. That was one snap. That was not a good one. I think we know which one that one was. Calvin Clements and Enrique Cruz both had a 0. So KU had 0 pass blocking grades from both offensive tackles. You're not going to win a game like that. You're just not. That's unfortunate. Run blocking grades, if we're looking at that, Tavaki Tuigalavatu had a 65.5. Let's see. Other offensive linemen, you have to go down to, this is not a good sign. Nolan Gorsuch got 58.9, Bryce Foster 57.7. The lowest on the run blocking grades were Kobe Baines at 49.3, Calvin Clements at 52, Enrique Cruz 52.1 as far as the offensive lineman for KU. So yeah, offensive line gets a bad goat. This was obviously a very bad game for the KU offensive line. I think 3rd and 1 play calling gets a bad goat here. This is something we talked about on the recap show too, that it felt like the 2 3rd and 1 situations should have been flipped and how you kind of called them. Beyond that, I guess you would also say for the bad goats on the offensive side, like using Cole Ballard over Isaiah Marshall, to me, I don't love that. Like, I think Isaiah Marshall just has more juice. And so if you're running the backup quarterback to avoid a hit on Jalon Daniels, that's fine. But to me, Isaiah Marshall is the better runner. Like, that's why he was such a highly recruited player, is some of the running ability. So I don't know why you wouldn't go with Marshall. I also they brought in Ballard at the end of the game instead of Marshall. So clearly he's still ahead of him on the 2 deep. But I thought that would have been a great opportunity to get Marshall some live reps. We've seen Ballard get like live reps in a Big 12 game. In fact, against Texas Tech, I would have loved Marshall to get those reps. So didn't love that there necessarily for KU either. Okay, defensive side of the ball, good goats for KU. Taylor Davis ended up with 4 tackles. He was targeted twice in coverage, and he gave up 121-yard catch. That was a touchdown, but he also had an interception for KU. He also overall wound up with a really good game on Pro Football Focus. He had a 79.3 grade, 84.8 in coverage. So shout out to Taylor Davis. Very good game for him. DJ Graham has had some struggles at moments this year. The Cincinnati game wasn't great, but he had a 78.6 this game. Again, we talked about it. Like, the pass coverage was actually pretty good for Kansas. There was a few mistakes early, but overall was pretty good. Graham ended up with 79 coverage. He was targeted 5 times, gave up 3 catches in the end, but just 17 yards. I mean, 5 targets with 17 yards allowed with a pass breakup. That's really good overall stats for DJ Graham. Keenan Caldwell had a 73.9. It feels like against the teams who have had the best running success against Kansas, Keenan Caldwell has come in and at least provided a little bit of pushback in I don't know, and it's allowed him to have higher snap counts in those games. But this is a good one. Dak Brinkley, just 12 snaps, but a 71.1. So that's a positive there for KU. And then Austin Alexander, 68.6, 72.7 in pass coverage. So again, those corners maybe starting to take steps up. That could be one positive for KU out of this game. Not a lot of pressure on the quarterback this game, just 5 pressures. So that would be a bad goat for KU, would be the pass rush. I would also say in general, the defensive line, this is probably the worst game of the season for the KU defensive line, because at least in the Cincinnati game, they got the occasional run stuff. They got the occasional pressure. In the Missouri game, you were at least pretty good on first and second down. You did get actually a good amount of like havoc plays. This game was just kind of the worst all around. So just 5 pressures in the end. Yeah, that would be a bad goat for KU. The missed tackles at 10, honestly, like that's not an insanely high number. It's probably, you probably want it closer to 7 or 8, but like, it's not like the Missouri game when it was 24, so I don't know. Tackling wasn't a bad goat. Maybe you could say the angles on the tackle, because there were a lot of times Tech just ran through, and maybe it was just like they just got out blocked, and then it was just a lot of untouched plays. It wasn't a lot of broken tackles, I guess, necessarily for KU, which I don't know what's better or worse necessarily. I'm also going to give a bad goat to PFF's grading system here, because Bangally Kamara is a 52.9. We're watching the same game. Bangally Kamara was awesome. So whatever. He gets a good goat for KU. Lyric Rawls only had a 60.7 there as well, and he only missed 1 tackle with 10 connected tackles. He also was targeted 4 times in coverage and only gave up 1 catch. He gets a good goat. I don't know why he only has a 60.7. So yeah, bad goat for the PFF grading system here. And then John Kamara only had a 28.6 grade and 13 snaps. Dean Miller a 46.3. Trey Lathan, his worst game as a Jayhawk, 47.4. Justice Finkley was on a tear. He only had a 52.4. Though again, take those with a grain of salt, because we just went over Bangally Kamara and his grade being way too low, so it's possible that that's the case for those guys as well. But overall, I think we just in general say run defense was a bad goat for KU. It was very, very bad. Shedding blocks on defense on the run, bad goat for KU. Pass rush, bad goat for the KU defense. So those will all be bad goats. Good goat for Laith Marjan as well, so I'll mention him. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. Bye week for KU football. We'll be talking a lot of KU basketball throughout the rest of the week, with Late Night in the Fog later this week. And then next week, it starts to get real. You get a KU exhibition game at Louisville, who's going to be really good. You get KU football against Kansas State. And from then on, we have kind of crossover season with basketball and football. So make sure to subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe. See you next time with Locked On Jayhawks.